Welcome to the Business Resilience Decoded podcast, brought to you by Asfalis Advisors and the Disaster Recovery Journal. Crisis management in today's world is ever-changing, and this podcast is our commitment to help you navigate successful outcomes for any crisis you may face. I'm your host, Vanessa Matthews. I specialize in providing insights and solutions for crisis, continuity, and resilience across industries from real estate and healthcare to terrorism in the airline and transportation worlds. No matter what industry you're in, this podcast will provide you the tools to build resilience in your organization. Welcome back to another episode of the Business Resilience Decoded podcast. Today, I'm super excited. We're going to be talking about supporting the next generation of hazard and disaster researchers. And today we have Dr. Nnenia Campbell. She is the Deputy Director of the Bill Anderson Fund. Dr. Campbell, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So just so I know, what's your preference, Dr. Campbell or Nnenia?
You can call me Nnenia. I'm not that formal.
Okay. Well, can you kick us off by sharing just a little bit about you and specifically your role with the Bill Anderson Fund?
Sure. I am a disaster sociologist. So much of my work in terms of research focuses on the social aspects of disasters. I am also, as the Deputy Director of the Bill Anderson Fund, running programs related to training disaster researchers, policymakers, and practitioners of the future. As a Black woman, I have encountered firsthand the lack of representation in the hazards and disaster field, whether that's in academia, in the practitioner realm. And I think that that's a really important issue to address if we are serious about also tackling the disproportionate impacts of disasters on marginalized communities broadly and communities of color in particular. So my work with the Bill Anderson Fund seeks to diversify the disaster field.
I love that. And so that's such an awesome tee up. Can you talk a little bit more about the history on William Anderson and why his work was so groundbreaking?
Sure. So he's most commonly known as Bill Anderson. His full name was William Averett Anderson. And so we are technically the William Averett Anderson Fund. But he was a really important figurehead in the field of disaster research and beyond research as well. Bill was also a sociologist. He got his PhD at the Ohio State University and worked with some of the pioneers of the disaster research field at the Disaster Research Center, both there at Ohio State and then also when it moved to the University of Delaware. He did a lot of direct research that focused on marginalized communities, that brought attention to the disproportionate impacts of disasters among women, among minorities, low-income populations, and also really pushed forward the mandate to study these populations and include their voices in research and policy. He worked at the National Academies of Sciences, the World Bank, and in addition to being an academic. And so he was steeped in many worlds and was really concerned with making sure that we had the knowledge and tools that were necessary to create a more equitable world and more equitable disaster outcomes. However, the one thing that he felt that he wasn't as successful in accomplishing in his career was diversifying the field, bringing those voices into the field directly. Even though he pushed forward a lot of research on these communities, he recognized that there were not as many scholars of color in particular that were needed to move the needle on that. And so that's an aspect of his legacy that we're trying to carry forward.
I love that because you can start something in a movement, right? But I also love that it was built with legacy in mind and the opportunity to continue on his work. And so as we think about the continuation, how would you describe what the mission or the purpose is today for the Bill Anderson Fund?
Our mission is to expand the number of historically underrepresented minority professionals in hazards and disaster research, policy, and practice. And our vision really is to have that representation translate into improved disaster outcomes for marginalized communities.
So how does the fund and the fellowship work? And can you talk a little bit more about some of the projects that the fellows are working on, just so kind of we can get a feel for what the day-to-day looks like?
Sure. We work right now with doctoral students in particular. This organization started in 2014 when I was a graduate student. I was one of the founding fellows, the first group of students who worked with Bill's widow, Norma Anderson, to establish this organization and build it out in a way that was designed to meet the needs of historically underrepresented students. And so that has moved forward with our work today. We started off working with all graduate students and really narrowed in on PhD students so that we could have that longer term influence on their work and on their networks, and in promoting them as early career scholars as they entered the professional world. So we do that through three primary areas: through professional development programming, so workshops, things that opportunities that expose them to knowledge that they need to be able to be successful leaders in the disaster space, whether they're in research or practice. Also through mentorship. We've always told our students to aim for the big dogs, tell us who they have always cited and have been afraid to talk to reach out to. And then we ask those individuals to be their mentors. And then also through networking, both through exposing them to the various fields and key players within the disaster and hazard space, but also through creating a network with each other. One of the things that we were missing when we started this organization was camaraderie with other students of color. Often we were the only ones in our PhD programs facing microaggressions, facing doubts from our faculty when we wanted to focus on communities of color with our research. And so it's also really important for us to have fellowship with one another if we're to create this groundswell of change within the fields that we filter into in our professional lives. So we provide that professional development programming, the network that they need to support each other and other students coming in behind them, and then the mentorship through key actors in the field. For example, the late Dennis Milletti was a long-term supporter of the Bill Anderson Fund, was a mentor to some of our fellows, and had a tremendous impact on their careers where they're now blossoming as professionals. So that's what our programming looks like on a day-to-day basis. And then we also provide some hands-on opportunities, for example, through research assistantships. I've directly worked with a group of fellows for the past couple of years in collaboration with the U.S. Geological Survey, as an example, to develop alternative communication mechanisms or prototypes for socializing their haywired earthquake scenario. So developing different kinds of approaches to communicating with socially marginalized groups, with socially vulnerable populations, and kind of expanding the horizons of the outreach they've already done to envision different ways of reaching populations that have not always been in their network.
Wow, I absolutely love it. And so as you think about the real purpose for why the organization exists and the environment that you all strive to continue to foster with the students, and also recognizing the challenges of Black and Brown communities in the emergency management or the disaster response space, what are some of the types of organizations that would be a good fit for the projects, the professional development, the research opportunities that the fellows would be exposed to?
I'm glad you asked this question because we're currently trying to expand the opportunities available to the students. We have historically collaborated with universities who are doing various kinds of disaster research and engineering or in the social sciences, but we're really trying to branch out to partnering with federal agencies, with state agencies, if there are those who have opportunities. We have an active weekly newsletter where we send out information about positions that are opening or internships, but we are really hoping to get our students more hands-on experience outside of the academic realm so that they're taking the expertise that they're developing and learning how that applies in the real world setting.
We always talk about like there's theory and then there's application. And so that's phenomenal. And so if we understand what's a good fit, how would you describe what may not be a good fit in terms of an organizational partnership with the Bill Anderson Fund?
We try to provide funded opportunities for the students. That's particularly important because graduate students' salaries are famously low. So we are looking for paid internship opportunities for them or other kinds of research assistantships. We also want to make sure that they're getting valuable hands-on learning experience. We don't want them just going and filling a diversity seat in an institution where they're not actually having a voice, having an opportunity to explore these issues that we know are so important and so critical, and actually need action, as opposed to lip service or rhetoric. And so we're looking for partners who are genuinely committed to working with students of color, to helping them develop themselves professionally and cultivate the skills that are needed for them to become the next leaders in this field. So I think that we're flexible on the specific content areas and types of opportunities. We are a multidisciplinary program, so we have students in linguistics, various kinds of engineering, urban planning. And so we don't limit it so much in terms of subject matter, but we do want there to be a genuine interest in their development and engaging them and helping to build that pipeline.
Love that. So you mentioned the federal government, and I have an interesting question. So when I think about the state of American government and the culture shift that we've seen for, I would probably say, the past decade plus, in terms of values, in terms of respecting and honoring history, putting facts first, what does that partnership look like in terms of, where there might be a president and a CEO, in air quotes, for those of you who are not watching the video version, that may have a different belief or a different place of how you respect diversity, equity, and inclusion versus the stakeholders within a business or within an agency that you're working with? Like, how do you balance, what the public image might be of a certain organization versus the experts within that business or within that organization that the fellows would potentially be working with, in terms of making sure that there's still that alignment that makes sense for the brand?
One of the things that we try to focus on is the importance of actually serving the whole community. And whether you feel that diversity and equity and these other words that often get thrown around are buzzwords, or whether you truly understand and try to incorporate them into your mission, at the end of the day, your mission is failing if you're not serving the most vulnerable members of the community. And there needs to be a genuine commitment to that. It can't be that there's certain people in the community that are not deserving of public services, of support from your entire organization. And so we recognize that there's not always a receptivity to many concepts, even the notion of climate change, and yet the effects are still being felt. So we really try to make sure that anyone we partner with has that genuine commitment to serving their community and to serving the entire community.
So when I first had a chance to meet you, you sharing more about the parameters and kind of the expectations for what a good partnership looks like was stuck out to me, because I feel like it really sticks to the values of the organization and who you really are. And so I'm curious, based on you having that alignment and being very clear of what that looks like, what have you seen in terms of how that has affected the experience for your fellows?
A few things. I think that there's a difference that they can feel when they are in an environment where they actively are being supported and working with people who have a genuine interest in addressing social inequality through their work. When they feel like they have people who they can trust as professionals who are invested in their training and the vision of this organization. It's very easy to recognize when you're not really being trusted or respected as a student of color, when there's the low expectation about what you can accomplish. We want to make sure that anyone we partner the students with is actually interested in being there for their development, for the vision, showing up for the communities that we're trying to serve. And at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. We're not here just to train academic rock stars. We're not here to promote people's careers in a way that's hollow and that doesn't ultimately address that foundational need to support marginalized communities and to move the needle forward on making sure that we don't continue to see suffering disproportionately in Black and Brown communities. There has to be a support for that fundamental goal of the BAF with anyone that we partner with, because that's the generation of leaders that we're trying to cultivate as an organization.
And so thinking about support, what does funding support for your program look like?
Right now, the professional development training, we fund the students' travel. We make sure that there are no costs to them for participating in our training, but we do not currently provide stipends for the students just for being a fellow. That's one of the things that we accomplish through providing these funded research opportunities. And that's why that's really important to us. As an organization, we certainly accept donations from individuals. We have a big fundraiser every summer that's a 5K race that's in affiliation with the Natural Hazards Research and Application Workshop. And that's our biggest fundraiser event of the year. But in terms of what funding looks like for the students, these are the opportunities that provide that funding. As an organization, we work with philanthropic organizations or universities to bring in funded opportunities there. And that includes research. So we have this fantastic network of alumni who have a lot of subject matter expertise who we bring in on projects occasionally, research projects. And so that's another way that we can partner in a funded relationship with other agencies and organizations.
So meaning like the research would be available for their use?
Yes, we work with research partners. So for example, with the collaboration with the U.S. Geological Survey, we are actively producing communication products and research that are beneficial to the organization, that they have access to, writing reports collaboratively. And that's also part of the training experience.
I've learned so much. Last question for you is, what's the best way for our subscribers to learn how they can support the Bill Anderson Fund? And then secondly, to be able to keep in touch and follow you guys?
Yes, so you can go to our website. That is billandersonfund.org. We are also on social media at BAF Fellows. We'd love for folks to come and explore what we do on our website, and feel free to reach out to us via our website. I'd be happy to talk to anyone who's interested in learning more about the Bill Anderson Fund.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Business Resilience Decoded podcast, brought to you by Asfalis Advisors and Disaster Recovery Journal. Make sure you check out the show notes for this episode to see all the upcoming events, programs, and ways we can support you. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, leave us a review, and share it with a friend. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.